everyone. Yes, that is the energy we need. Hello, everyone. Yes, we are excited. We are prepared for this third last keynote on this incredible stage here. Now, right before we got started today, you got some paper handed out. We'll be having pens come in a second, but if you have extra pens and the person beside you doesn't, we're going to share, we're going to care about each other because we are all here for the same reason, to learn, to be invigorated, and to have a really great time. So, our next speaker is going to be coming out here and really talking about the innovation and the future of the legal practice. They are a professor at Vanderbilt University, as well as a lawyer themselves. Without further ado, an incredibly warm welcome for the one and only Kat Moon.
Hey y'all, how are ya? So I'm not used to talking with a microphone right in front of my mouth, so hopefully it will not crackle and pop. And I also have another microphone here. I'm highly wired. So, all right, you will see the blue screen of tranquility in front of you. All right, so we're gonna take a moment of tranquility. I'd ask you all, I personally really need this, and I think it's gonna help us all focus and center. So we're gonna just spend a minute. If everybody could please sit back in your chair. Put screens down, please. Feet flat on the floor, kind of feel your connection to the floor. Shoulders back, and then just kind of relax into your seat. So get comfy. Okay, I invite you to close your eyes if you like. You don't have to. We're gonna start with just one deep breath. Deep breath in, feel the air, fill your lungs. Hold it there for a second. Then exhale. And I'm going to ask that you just simply breathe and focus on your breath for the next minute or so. We're just going to breathe and focus on our breath to the exclusion of all the thoughts and concerns that we brought into the room. Focus on the breath. All right, thank you all for taking that moment, and hopefully that gave you the opportunity to kind of shake off anything you brought into the room and can be present and focused. I personally needed that. I was very motivated this morning. I took it very easy last night. I got up early, went to the fitness center, was doing some great work on the treadmill, and I got a little too aggressive, a little too confident, and I got in a fight with the treadmill. The treadmill won, unfortunately, so I'm a little bruised and battered, but hopefully none the worse for wear. So that moment of calm helped me get ready to talk with you. We are going to be a little bit interactive, so hopefully you got a piece of paper when you came in the room and have something to write with. There'll be an opportunity to get some if you didn't, but I am going to ask you to work with me a little bit. So, all right, so I am Kat Moon. I was asked by the nice folks here at Clio to come talk with you today about innovation and the future of the practice, and so I'm going to share some hopefully very focused thoughts on that in a way that will be meaningful and hopefully practical to you both. Some of you might know me from Twitter. I'm Inspired Kat on Twitter, and if we don't already know each other, if we don't engage, I invite you to find me and engage with me. I really like meeting new people on Twitter. So I teach at Vanderbilt Law School. I have a primary course called Legal Problem Solving, which is our way of convincing the ABA to let me teach human-centered design to lawyers. So we kind of had to play around with the name a little bit, not to make anyone upset or too confused. But I teach human-centered design, which is a problem-solving heuristic. The Design Your Life folks talked about it a little bit this morning. How many of y'all were here for the opening keynote? Were very many of you? Oh, good, good. So you have some context for some of what I'm going to talk about, and I'll make some points related to that as well. I am the Director of Innovation Design at Vanderbilt Law School, so I teach law students how to go forth and be innovative and help move our profession forward, the future of the practice. I also teach the business of law, and next semester I'll be teaching blockchain and smart contracts. So I like to dig into the technology innovation-oriented stuff myself. So I spend pretty much all day, every day, thinking about innovation, which I know is a word that some folks are just kind of tired of hearing. It seems like it's becoming a bit of a buzzword, and there are constant conversations on Twitter about what do we even mean by innovation? What is this word? And we're just kind of bandying it around with very little meaning or purpose. Well, I would suggest that it has a lot of meaning and purpose, and so I consider myself a student of innovation and all that goes into that concept, which I'm going to give you my definition of in just a moment. In addition, I am a teacher, as I said, at Vanderbilt. I teach in the program in law and innovation, and so it's my constant mission and goal to be creating I call them baby lawyers who go forth with an innovative mindset. But in addition, I just also wanted to point out that I'm a lawyer. As of October 12th of this year, I will have been a practicing lawyer for 20 years. I think we probably all remember that day when we got the news that we passed the bar exam. So my day was October 12th. Fast approaching. So I'm a fifth-generation lawyer as well. My father, who's been practicing law almost as long as I've been alive, recently retired. And so I consider it to be really in my blood. I feel I guess a little bit of a family responsibility to be carrying forth and helping to improve our profession as we face the evolving legal landscape. So let's go back to innovation for a moment. I'm going to give you my definition, and I think this is a really helpful and practical definition, and it's also incredibly simple, and I think it demystifies the concept of innovation. It is simply change that creates value. That's all it is. It can be a tiny, infinitesimal idea that results in change that creates value in your life. It can be a big-ass idea that creates a lot of change, that creates a lot of value. But really, most often, innovation in our world is a tiny little thing. It's that tiny little light bulb. And so what is innovative for one person doesn't necessarily mean innovation for someone else, but each of us go forth in our daily lives doing small incremental things to create change, which creates value. That's all innovation is. And I suggest that if we embrace that notion of innovation and apply it in our daily lives, we have a really, really incredibly bright future in the legal profession. Let's talk about that profession a little bit, because it is a valid question to ask, why should you care about innovation? Why is this concept really relevant, and what does it mean to you specifically in your daily life, in your daily practice? Well, I think it's relevant to all of us because we are all a part of this. This is my vision for the legal landscape. Our legal landscape, our future, is this very lush, verdant landscape with lots of opportunity for all of us to create and grow an amazing future for our profession. Now, you'll notice there are some clouds up at the top, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I'm here to tell you that this is not the future of our legal landscape. If you spend much time on Twitter, you will come across a few people who very much like to prognosticate about the doom and gloom of the future of our profession unless we lawyers take certain steps and do certain things. They like to talk about the Luddite lawyer who's on the road to nowhere. I reject this version of our future. Anybody here with me? Yeah, right? This is not our future. This is our future, a lush, verdant landscape full of opportunity. Okay, now, as I said, there are some clouds. We have a few clouds. We have some challenges. Technology, admittedly, is a bit of a challenge. It's a challenge in a number of ways, and I know I'm really preaching to the choir here. I know you folks get all this, but I just want to highlight kind of where I get to where I'm going in a minute. Technology, it's a shield and a sword for us, but it also is a challenge. Archaic regulatory structure. I will simply refer you to my friend Patrick Pallas if you want to talk about the challenges that our regulatory structure poses. But it poses some very serious constraints on our ability to change and create value in our profession. Alternative providers. In this raft, I include a whole host of people from LegalZoom to law companies to legal process outsourcing companies. They pose a challenge to the work that lawyers currently do. Economic pressures. I will simply refer you to the Legal Trends report that Clio has been producing for a few years now. I imagine all of you also have your own practices and understand the daily economic pressures that an attorney practicing in this day and time faces. I certainly do, as someone who started my first firm with 2 other women in 2006 and went from there, created 2 other firms. So I understand very deeply the economic pressures that we all practicing attorneys face on a daily basis. I want to suggest there's another challenge that never gets brought into the innovation conversation, and I consider it my personal mission in life right now actually to bring this into our conversation, because I believe that no matter the sophisticated structure for a new firm, no matter the amazingly technologically advanced platform that we create to deliver legal services, no matter how successful we are in getting rid of the hourly billing model to create alternative fee structures, until we are healthy, until our profession really values well-being and mental health, we're not going to take full advantage of that verdant legal landscape that we have before us. Just a few highlights. I think we're all pretty familiar with this, but 21% of us identify as problem drinkers. 19% of us experience anxiety to an extent that prevents us from actually doing our work to our best ability. And what I think is one of the most concerning statistics is this one. 28% of us recognize ourselves as depressed to the extent that it does interfere with our ability to do our work. So I think that these are challenges which must be a part of our conversation about innovation, about moving our profession forward, change that creates value. I'll tell you what's incredible change to create value is making it possible for us to take part in this profession in a much healthier way. I agree completely with the Task Force for Lawyer Wellbeing. To be a good lawyer, you have to be a healthy lawyer. So I really believe this needs to be part of the conversation. Now, this is not what my talk is about today. I actually have some different points to make, but it's an important piece of this conversation to me, and so this is why I bring it up. And I'll be honest with you, it also hit really close to home for me. I'm part of a small local bar, very small, just a couple of hundred of us, and we lost one of our colleagues to suicide last month. And to be faced with having a professional and frankly friendship relationship with someone who's just become one of those statistics, has really only made me more committed to bringing this into the conversation. So I've given you all a bunch of lemons. We have a bunch of challenges, okay? I like to think of them as opportunities, but we'll get to that in a moment. Actually, this is an opportunity for you right now. I'm going to stop talking for a minute, and I'm going to find my phone so I can run the timer. But everybody should have gotten a piece of paper, and hopefully you have something to write with. This is important, so bear with me here. If you would take the next 1 minute, 60 seconds, and I want you on the top of a piece of paper to write down 3 challenges that you personally are facing right now. Very quickly, first 3 things that come to your mind. 3 challenges. And please play along. I promise it will be fun. Okay. All right. So hold on to that. We're going to come back to that. All right, so as I said, I like to reframe challenges as opportunities. So I'm one of those glass half full people. I'm going to make lemonade from my lemons. So how do we do that? How do we pivot from the challenges and create opportunity? So I think this is where innovation comes in. I think this is where the tiny things that we choose to do tomorrow change that creates value. I think it's those incremental things that add up that help us create lemonade from the lemons. I teach a specific problem-solving method which helps us take problems and turn them into opportunity to create a brighter future in the legal profession. My primary heuristic for this is human-centered design, which the Design Your Life folks talked about this morning. I'm not going to go through the process because that's not what my talk is about. Frankly, an hour is not a long enough time to do it justice, and so, but I did want to reference this point primarily so I could talk about something else. And while human-centered design is a process for solving problems, I think even more importantly and more powerfully, it is a set of mindsets. And if you can embrace these mindsets, it's incredibly powerful. One of the mindsets is experimentation, running small experiments, doing things, trying things and getting feedback and figuring out what works and what doesn't. This is a mindset of human-centered design. Another is embracing ambiguity. Our world is increasingly ambiguous. Spend any time online on any social media platform, and you can be overwhelmed with information that only makes our existence more ambiguous. Human-centered designers, folks with these mindsets, embrace the ambiguity and see it as an opportunity to create change that creates value. We reframe. The Design Your Life folks talked about this as well. Reframing is exactly this, looking at a problem from a different perspective so that you can create opportunity instead of being afraid of the challenge it poses. Collaboration. I think this is critical, and especially for the legal profession, this isn't just about collaborating with each other, which I think we're getting better at. We are not trained in law school to play well with others. I'm trying hard to change that. But I think what is equally important is, as a profession, we are coming to realize that we've got to learn to play nice with people across other disciplines and across other industries. And there is an increasing body of research that shows that when you get a group of people together who are cognitively diverse, meaning they've been trained to answer questions in different ways, they actually get to better answers more quickly. So what that means is that getting a group of lawyers around the table is not the way to get to the best answer most in the quickest fashion. We've got to learn to collaborate with people from other disciplines. And I think we're really getting better at that. Another key aspect, another key mindset of human-centered design is empathy. And by this, I simply mean putting yourself in the shoes of the person for whom you are solving a problem. It's called cognitive empathy, and it means understanding their perspective and where they come from. It is not the same as feeling what someone else feels or having sympathy for them. It is understanding the place from which they stand and seeing the world from their eyes. Critical mindset for human-centered design, and I think, frankly, for the practice of law. Finally, there is curiosity. All right, curiosity is wanting to know and learn new things. I consider all of these mindsets superpowers. And this has been true in my own life, in my own practice, and as I have evolved through the legal profession, and I see it unfold daily with my students. I see it unfold with lawyers that I work with. I think the number one superpower from human-centered design, the number one mindset, is curiosity. And so I'd like to spend the next few minutes trying to convince you that you should embrace the superpower of curiosity and use this power for good. So what do we talk about when we talk about curiosity? And this is another thing that came up often in the Design Your Life talk this morning. In fact, I would go so far to say that pretty much everything they laid out today, by the way, I have the book, I've followed their program, and I actually use part of it in my class with my students, so I'm very familiar with what they do. I would go so far as to suggest that virtually everything they talked about was based on curiosity. So curiosity means you are someone who embraces new experiences. You want to experience new things. You are someone who seeks knowledge. You are not happy to sit back and rest on what you already know. And Lord knows lawyers consider themselves smart people, and we do know a lot once we come out of the mill that is law school. And I think we continue to grow, but curious people seek new knowledge constantly. Curious people seek feedback. They actually want to know how things are going for the people that they're working with and the people that they're working for. So they want to learn from others. And finally, and to me this is critical, curious people are open to change. Which I think that in and of itself, like that subset of curiosity, is definitely a superpower in today's age. All right, so I have proclaimed curiosity to be the ultimate superpower, and I have defined it for you, given you some of the elements of curiosity. So how do you become a super curious person? And what exactly is that going to get you? All right? I want to take this moment to acknowledge that I am not the first person to talk about curiosity in the legal profession. Carolyn Elephant wrote a great piece in Above the Law not long ago talking about how basically law school is killing curiosity, and therefore curiosity is dying in the legal profession, and it's all just sucks and it's terrible. I happen to agree, and this is why I teach my law students to be super curious. But I want to acknowledge Carolyn's contribution to this conversation. And when I started looking into this, I found this post from Kevin O'Keefe from 2011. And in this post, Kevin wrote about how curiosity could serve lawyers well. Now, I just recently came across this, so this did not inspire my interest in it, but it definitely did affirm my interest in it. So I would also want to point out that I'm not the only person, and Kevin and Carolyn aren't the only people interested in curiosity. In fact, Harvard Business Review devoted its entire September-October magazine this year in 2018 to curiosity. So the business case for curiosity, how to cultivate curiosity, why curiosity matters. So this is the subject of actually very deep research, and they're connecting it to the basis for success in business across industries. So, okay, back to the super curious person. Why does someone want to become a super curious person? What is in it for you to listen to me continue to talk about curiosity, and what are you going to get out of it by the end of the day? Well, would you believe me if I told you that curiosity makes you smarter? Curious people perform better on standard measurements of intelligence, and they also perform better in a number of other ways, which all track to being a more intelligent person. So I think we all want to be smarter. Well, be curious, and you will be smarter. Interestingly, there's research that shows that when it comes to performing well in business, curiosity is seen as a measure that might just be as important as intelligence. So those two things are tightly linked. Curiosity makes you stronger. Curious people are able to persevere and show more grit. And that is because when they are faced with a challenge, they don't freak out and go, holy shit. They're like, I'm curious about that. I'm going to dig into it and figure out how to solve this challenge. Curious people are stronger in the face of change and adversity. Curious people have greater focus. Curious people want to know more about the problem they are faced with. They want to know more about possible solutions, so they tend to dig deeper and be more focused in their consideration of how to solve the problems. Curious people are more creative. Now, I would suggest to you that innovation is really scaffolding. So you start with curiosity at the base level. You've got to be a curious person ultimately to be a really great innovator. Curiosity leads to creativity. Curious people wanting to know more, wanting to dig into the why of things, tend to seek new information, which helps them expand their ideas. Creativity is simply creating new ideas. Creativity is built on curiosity, which leads to innovation. Curious people are more creative. Curious people make fewer errors. And I find this very interesting, but it really makes sense. All this that I'm telling you is based on research done over the past 50 to 60 years. So curious people make fewer errors because they are interested in knowing more about the problem, and they're interested in knowing more about potential solutions, and so they are more considerate and more thorough in considering how to solve problems. And when they come to a solution, it's likely to be the right solution when compared to someone who does not self-describe as curious. Finally, and I think this is critical for where our profession is going, curious people are better collaborators. They play better with others. Why? Because curious people are empathetic. Curious people want to know what others are thinking, and they ask what they're thinking, and they listen to the response. So when you have a group of people who are working together and they are paying attention to what other people think, and they're listening instead of doing all the talking, then the outcome of the collaboration is much, much more positive than when you have folks who want to do all the talking. Okay, so I've told you some of the benefits of curiosity, all of which, again, based on research, and I've had personal experience with all of them. But there are true barriers to curiosity. I'm sure this isn't surprising. For instance, we don't seem to have a very curious mindset generally. It's really interesting to me when you talk with other folks about curiosity, and I ask people this question very often, you know, how curious do you consider yourself? It's one of the questions I ask my students when we start the semester. Folks seem to have an interesting relationship with curiosity, and I think part of our mindset is that we haven't really valued it in a meaningful way. You know, one of the other barriers is actually efficiency. Time to get stuff done. Curiosity, actually efficiency is sort of the enemy of curiosity in many ways. When we are so focused on being efficient and we don't let ourselves ask the question, or what I call go down the gravel roads to find the really interesting information that can be at the heart of something, because we're so focused on getting things done in an efficient manner, it really squelches our curiosity. A great example from business, Henry Ford became the master of efficiency in making a black Model T. He could churn those out and sold very well, top-selling car for a long time. Then suddenly, people are like, I don't really want a black car. I would like a car with different colors. I would like other options. Well, Ford at that point was so focused on efficiency that there was no room in their process for being curious about what people really wanted from their car. And so their market share began to slip and slip and slip and slip. And that was simply because Ford valued efficiency more than curiosity about the people who they sought to serve. And finally, I think that our work, actually, to Carolyn Elephant's point, I think our work is a real barrier to curiosity. And not just the work of lawyers. Research shows that the longer you're in a job, actually the less curious you become. I don't know if it's kind of correlated with boredom. We just get sick and tired of what we're doing and we stop asking questions and being curious. But research shows that the longer we do something, the less curious we become. So we have to be cognizant of this barrier. So, okay, there are a bunch of reasons why you want to be a super curious person. We know there are barriers, and I just touched on a few. There are many, many other barriers, especially when it comes to the legal profession. What can you do to become a super curious person? Because I will say again, I think that in this scaffolding, when you start with curiosity and from that you build creativity, that is where innovation comes from. And to take full advantage of all the opportunity that lies in our verdant legal landscape, I think we've really got to start cultivating curiosity to move the profession forward. So the very first thing you can do to become a super curious person is to listen. And in my experience, this is not something that lawyers always do well. So I think it might be a little bit more of a barrier in our profession than some others for a whole host of reasons, which I'll be happy to talk about one-on-one with anyone. But listening, becoming a really good listener, caring more about listening than being the one who talks. And that requires asking really, really good questions. Asking lots of questions. And it's interesting, this is kind of one of those barriers to curiosity. I think we have a cultural mindset that if you ask a lot of questions, you're going to appear to not be as smart. Because if you know things, if you're a smart person, why are you asking all these questions? Well, interestingly, rather counterintuitively, research shows that the most respected and trusted people are those who ask lots of questions. People actually like it when you ask questions of them and seek information from them. It builds trust, and they actually think that you are a competent person when you ask questions. So asking really good questions, it's critical for curiosity, and it actually is an excellent way to build trust. So I wrap up all of this in the phrase humble curiosity. This is my theme for the class I teach at Vanderbilt, the legal problem solving class, where I teach them the elements and mindsets of human-centered design. So humble curiosity actually has a technical meaning in the world of research, and that is intellectual humility. And all that means is that we acknowledge we don't know it all. We are not always the smartest person in the room. We always have something to learn. And so that is why we are curious, and that is why we ask questions. Because we don't know what we don't know. And there's a lot that we don't know. And the person who is humbly curious is the person who learns the most. All right, so an example of humble curiosity, I'm going to give you a few examples as we go along. My Twitter friend Colin Levy, he's an attorney on the East Coast. He exhibits humble curiosity in his tweets all the time. And I liked this one because he's actually pointing out that our profession needs a little bit more humble curiosity. Okay, here is another way you can become a super curious person, and that is to create learning goals. And this is super simple, y'all. This is not anything complicated. But why it's important to create learning goals in terms of increasing your curiosity and really using it to your advantage in both your professional and, frankly, your personal life. We all want to move forward, right? We all want tomorrow to be better than it was today. At least I do, and I think most of us do. We definitely want that for the legal profession. Again, research shows, and I found this interesting, if you take someone and give them learning goals, they are highly motivated to learn and take that information and do good things with it to succeed. If, in a similar fashion, you give someone targets to reach, that person is actually less motivated and less successful than the person who was given a learning goal rather than a performance target. There's lots of research in sales that shows that if you take a person and say, here's a way to learn how to be a good salesperson. follow this learning path and to become a good salesperson. That person is highly motivated to go forth and learn and do and succeed. If you take another person and say, here is a sales target I want you to hit. You need to sell X thousands of these widgets over the next month. Guess what? That person isn't nearly as motivated, nor are they as successful. So a curious person is someone who wants to continually be learning. So to cultivate that curiosity, to motivate and to move to success, create some learning goals. What is something you want to know more about? What are 3 things you can do tomorrow to start learning more about that thing? It's that simple. And here is a twofer. This is a book you can read to learn, and it's about how to ask good questions. So I wanted to share this with you. It's one of my favorite books. I'll include a link to it in the talk notes as well. A More Beautiful Question. So you can learn how to be a better question asker. Good book. All right. Here's another way to be a more curious person. Be an explorer. Go out in the world and explore and look for new information to learn. Spy interesting ideas. Spy interesting people. So one of my favorite explorers is Lori Gonzalez. She's here at Clio. She is from Nashville with me. And I had trouble actually picking which tweets of Lori's I wanted to use it as examples. But Lori will, I think, self-describe as a stalker. And what I love about Lori and her stalking is that she is so passionate about finding interesting people and going out and meeting them. And I kid you not, like, you cannot hide from Lori. She will go find interesting people, and then but the coolest thing, her real superpower, well, she's endlessly curious, but then she finds the interesting people and she connects them, and it is magical and beautiful. So Lori is one of my favorite explorers. Another explorer in my Twitter world is an attorney from South Carolina, Jack Pringle. He's a great explorer. He goes out and gathers really interesting ideas all the time, and then he shares them on Twitter. So you can add Twitter to your learning plan if you want to be exposed to interesting new ideas. Another thing, another way, another tactic for becoming a more curious person is to make time, or as the Design Your Life guys would say, make energy for doing it. Actually build into what you do an effort, an intentional effort to be curious. I do this in a very simple way. I, on at least a quarterly basis, do a little exercise. I call it my curiosity exercise. You've already done the first part of it if you wrote down 3 challenges. So I keep a running list of challenges I face. And on a regular basis, I sit down and I ask 3 different questions about the challenges I face. I try to limit it to just 1 or 2, or else it gets a little overwhelming. But so I ask why, and we're going to talk about the why, the 5 whys in just a minute. I ask what if. And this is a way of laying out potential solutions to the challenges. And then I ask, how might I get that done? I figure out actual tactics for creating the solutions and making them happen in the real world. I create time for that. So you've got to be intentional and create time. Again, Lori, a recent tweet, great example. And what I love about this is Lori's talking about carving out time to work with her staff, about being curious about how things are going, even when things are going well. What I love about this tweet also is she's curious about, hey, what's working for others? So this is a perfect example of making time for curiosity and also exploring and looking for new ideas elsewhere. All right, I'm going to dovetail back into that final point about what I think we need to change to move our profession forward, and that is taking better care of ourselves. So I think you need to become curious about you, and I'm dead serious about this. I start my legal problem-solving class every year with the students taking some important self-assessments so that they have some self-awareness and they understand more about themselves. to be a good caretaker of others, to be a good problem solver for others, you have to know yourself and you have to take care of yourself. A lawyer who is not healthy cannot be a good lawyer. And I'm not suggesting that we're a room full of unhealthy people. I mean, you can look around and statistically, about a third of the people around you recognize or describe themselves as depressed. But that means 2/3 of us aren't. So how do you get curious about yourself? Well, guess what? You can take a curiosity profile. You can actually take this really cool, short, little, simple assessment on Harvard Business Review that will give you some insight into how curious you are. I will share the link in my talk notes if you're interested in doing that. My students do it at the beginning of every semester, and then we take it again at the end. And uniformly, their curiosity profiles improve over the course of the semester, even for those who describe themselves as very not curious. Here's another way to be curious about yourself. This is another topic I could devote at least an hour of conversation to, but this is an assessment that I think is a brilliant way to learn more about yourself and learn more about your strengths and superpowers. It's called the VIA Character Assessment, and again, it's a simple online assessment you can take. It gives you, you learn about 24 character strengths that are recognized as strengths across every single human culture known on Earth. Curiosity is one of those strengths, and it tells you how better to use these strengths in your daily life. Now, probably 30 years of research shows that if you are able to use on a daily basis the top 3 to 5 strengths from your assessment, you are a much happier and productive person. And so I think that what a simple way to get curious about yourself and use your strengths to your advantage. All right, I also think that it's important for us to be curious about those around us. Again, talking about well-being. Learn about yourself, but also pay attention to your colleagues. I think that we have a personal responsibility to take care of ourselves, but be curious of those around you, and if you see somebody who needs help, throw them that life preserver. Reach out. Be curious and aware of those around you. It is very well documented, even recently so, that our profession really views mental health with an incredible stigma. And I'm going to say again, if we don't really intentionally focus on this challenge, all of the other brilliant innovation we're doing around that is not going to save us. We've got to be curious about how we're doing, both ourselves and those around us. Okay, it is not time to run away, unless you're mindlessly bored, and then you may go. It is time for an exercise. So hopefully you took the time to write down your 3 challenges on a piece of paper, as I invited you to. We're going to do something with that now. We're going to do a little something I call the 5 whys. I did not make this up. Toyota has been doing this for decades. And on the Toyota line, when something goes wrong, they ask why 5 times in order to get to the real crux of what's causing the problem. And so I like to think of the 5 whys as a Russian doll. Is everyone familiar with a Russian doll? So you've got the doll, the wooden doll, you take the top off, you reach in, there's another doll, you pull it out. Well, the top comes off of that. You reach in, there's another doll. And on and on and on. So the dolls are nested, and I like to think of the 5 whys as a way that helps us get to that really inner doll, the one that the top doesn't come off anymore. That's kind of the crux of the problem. So right now we're going to do a little exercise with the 5 whys, and here's how it's going to work. You need to find a buddy, turn to a person next to you. You both have a list of your challenges, and one of you is going to take one of the challenges from your partner and ask why. Why is this a challenge for you? and you're going to get an answer, and you're going to ask why again. So you're going to dig in a little bit. All right, so I require interactivity whenever I talk. So now we're going to take a couple of minutes, and you're going to start just asking each other why. For 2 minutes, one person asks, and then you switch. And if anyone is terribly confused about what I'm saying, first of all, there's no way to do this wrong. The point is just to engage and talk to the person next to you and get some information about a challenge they're facing. And if you're really confused, raise your hand and I'll come talk to you. They were supposed to give me a hand mic, but they didn't. So, all right, so 1, 2, 3, go. Ask why 5 times. Pull out those Russian dolls.
Okay, for those who played along, hopefully you have an idea of a challenge your partner faces and perhaps a little bit of depth. Hopefully you were curious in wanting to understand why they face this challenge. So now we're going to put your curiosity to the test, okay? So the next step is, right, there are 3 steps in this curiosity exercise. The first is understanding what the challenge is and why. Pulling out the Russian dolls to get to the crux of what's going on. So then your challenge is to say, okay, what if? You now need to suggest some solutions to the problem, to the challenge that your partner has presented you with, okay? So you know the challenge, you have a little bit of information about what some of the reasons why the challenge exists. I want one of you to turn to your partner, start suggesting some what ifs. What if you do this? What if you try this? All right? So this is the second step. After curiosity, there's a little creativity. All right, is everybody ready to be a little creative? Looking very perplexed. That's okay. There's no wrong way to do this. I love to make people uncomfortable. My students can tell you all about that. All right, so now go. What if? Suggest. Be creative. All right, friends. You've just completed step 2. I know this is really fast, and normally you would spend more time with this, but it's giving you a flavor. The next question you ask is, how might we? All right, so this is the 3rd step in the exercise. And honestly, this is where we all fall down. So we get curious about why something is wrong. Then we start thinking about brilliant ideas of how to fix it, right? That's the fun part. The ideation or brainstorming stage. It's a hell of a lot of fun. But the problem is, what do we do with that? Very often we don't move on to the final step, and that's actually doing something with the fantastic ideas you've created. That's critical. You've got to do something, or else what's the point? So the how might we is, what are the tactical steps you're going to take to actually do the thing that you've brainstormed, right? So hopefully your partner gave you a great idea for a way that you could solve one of the challenges that you're facing. So your task now, we're out of time, so we're not going to do it right now, but my challenge to you is to take that and go back and ask yourself, how might I actually do this? Like, what are the 4 things that I can do to make this happen? And I think this is really a critical piece in how we actually make change that creates value, how we innovate and how we move our future forward. I think every single one of us sitting in this room has the capacity each and every day to be an innovator. In your own life, in your own world, in your own work. You do one small thing that is something different, that creates value for you, and that ripples out. So that's my primary message to you. I'm going to stop talking now because we do have a couple of minutes for questions.
I had to plan for like a group that could be really small or really large. And if you've ever been to one of my talks before, they're typically much more interactive. So I appreciate, given the constraints of this format, all of you who really jumped in and engaged on that little exercise. I want to leave you with a final thought. All right, and to me, this is kind of brings together all my points. I hope that we can figure out a way to replace the fear of the unknown with our curiosity of moving forward in the profession better, making small change every single day that creates value, not only for our clients, but also for ourselves. All right, thank you, and I'm happy to entertain questions. I now have the mic. I had hoped to kind of get out and amongst people, and it didn't work out exactly as I had planned, but questions? Anyone? You can come up to the mics if you have a question. I think we have a question. Yay. Someone's curious. Oh!
So, in innovating in the legal field, what is the most unexpected right turn that this, I guess, 5 whys and this brainstorming has come up with, that you have seen?
So I can tell you from my personal experience, and that's probably the best thing for me to speak from. I can tell you I learned this process from a client back in 2010. And I saw her doing really amazing things in her work, and I wanted to understand how she was doing those things. I was also highly motivated to change the way I worked for a whole host of reasons. And so I started doing this, and this process, this exact process, actually led to my ability to practice fundamentally on completely my own terms. So I went from hourly billing to all flat fees. I went to having a very not efficient and automated practice to having a very efficient and automated practice. And that happened, frankly, before Clio was even a thing. I was one of the first users of Clio, by the way. But I was in the cloud probably 2 years before Clio even came into existence. And so for me, it helped me really get ahead of where now some people still aren't. And I'm not saying I was any smarter or brighter. I was just very curious about learning, and I was able to really understand through the 5 whys the problems I was facing and look to others for potential solutions. This same process. I hope that was somewhat responsive. No other curious people?
Hello to one of my favorite people on Twitter. My question is, I love the idea of being curious, and I try to be curious, but sometimes I'm just overwhelmed. How do you deal with rebuilding your curiosity when all you want to do is hide in a corner and sleep for a bit and just let the world be quiet until you've recharged?
That's an excellent question. So I think, first of all, it's okay to do just that sometimes. Like, I don't think that we have to be constantly, never-ending curious to the detriment of our own mental well-being. But I do think that curiosity is a practice. And so similar to what the Designing Your Life guys said this morning, set a really low barrier to entry goal. And for instance, if you just have a learning plan, if you just say, and this is something I do to challenge myself, I wanted to learn graphic design. And so I just built into my schedule a small way on a daily basis to learn more about this thing I was really curious about and interested in. But I think to your point, sometimes it is healthy to kind of turn it off. And that doesn't mean we're not curious people. It just means we're taking care of ourselves. Also on Twitter, so I think Twitter is a great place for curious people, and it's a great place to cultivate your curiosity. Use filters. Like, you don't have to unfollow people, but if someone's not feeding your optimistic outlook on life, get them out of your feed. I think you can be curious and still protect yourself in that way. Another question.
This will have to be our last question. Thank you.
Wondering if you could comment on sort of what you think is the ability of curious people to coexist with non-curious people, that, like in a law firm, for example, you know. Yeah.
Ooh. So I think curious people help bring the non-curious out of the shadows. And so I think that first I will say you can exercise curiosity safely even if you're in a place that doesn't support it or recognize it and value it. But I think that requires more intention, frankly, than if you're in a place that really does encourage and value it. I really do. My exposure to working in a group of with a group of people that was a mix. I found that the curious person who also exercises emotional intelligence with that can really help bring everybody along into a more curious mindset. Some people are just going to be curmudgeons, and it's probably a waste of time and energy to try to bring everyone along. I'm just being honest. I've got people like that in my own family. So, lawyers, in fact, but not my father, thankfully. So I think it is encouraging that in others, but also using emotional intelligence and understanding. You know, I will say this very quickly. I had a great question. I talked about curiosity at Brigham Young University Law School on Wednesday. And one of the students said, how do I not offend people when I'm really curious? And that's kind of a similar, and I think that's when you exercise emotional intelligence and understand when you've got to kind of put the brakes on and limits to that. And then go find your curious friends and people, and then just go hog wild with them. So thank you all. You all have been incredibly attentive, and thank you for playing along. It's been a pleasure and a joy and an honor to be here. Y'all have a great rest of the day. Thank you.